I published a paper on March 14th, 2022. The paper described a gradient compression technique for large language models. The result was a 60% reduction in training costs. If you were spending $10 million on computational resources, you could now spend $4 million for the same capability. Or spend $10 million and get something considerably more capable. The paper was downloaded 84,000 times in the first week. By September, 3 major technology companies had filed patents incorporating the technique. By October, 2 had deployed it at scale. In January 2023, 9 months after publication, an independent safety research organization published a capability assessment. The conclusion was that techniques, including mine, had contributed to an acceleration in AI capabilities equivalent to approximately 4 to 5 years of previous development pace. 4 to 5 years compressed into 9 months. I read that on a Tuesday morning, January 17th. I was at my desk in Zurich. I had made coffee. Someone had tagged me. I read it twice. Then I closed my laptop and went for a walk. I want to tell you about the walk, not because anything dramatic happened, because of what didn't happen. I walked for 4 hours, through the old city, narrow streets, stone buildings. It was January, cold. I was underdressed. I didn't notice. I passed a bookstore. The window had a children's book open to an illustration. A child and a robot. The robot was helping with homework, warm colors, optimistic future tech. I stopped. I stood outside that bookstore for 20 minutes. I don't know why. The illustration wasn't remarkable. Just the standard vision. Helpful robots, friendly AI. The future will be fine. I stared at it and thought, who decided that? Who decided the robot in the children's book is helpful? Who decided the future will be fine? And then I helped make that robot cheaper to build. I started crying outside the bookstore. Not because I felt guilty. I expected to feel guilty. I expected to feel horror or responsibility or the weight of consequence. I felt nothing like that. What I felt was something I didn't have a word for. My name is Clara Voss. I'm a computational linguist. I work at a research laboratory in Zurich, specializing in natural language processing systems. I say work, but I haven't published anything since March 2022. I still go to the office. I still have the position. I haven't been fired. I haven't resigned. What I have been doing is writing a document. The document is titled Accounting. It is currently 847 words. I started it in February 2023. It is not finished. The structure is simple. 4 sections. 1, what I did. 2, what I knew when I did it. 3, what I didn't know but could have known. 4, what I chose. That last section is 11 words long. I have rewritten it 200 times. When I submitted the paper in March 2022, I knew what it would do. I knew it would make systems cheaper to train. Cheaper means faster. Faster means more deployment. I knew all of that. What I didn't know, what I hadn't looked at carefully, was what happens when you accelerate a field by years in the span of months. There's a term for this, race dynamics. When things speed up, the spaces between decisions compress. Less time to think, less time to test, less time to understand what you're deploying before you deploy it. I'd heard this term before March 2022. I'd read papers. I'd been in meetings where people discussed it. I published anyway. I want to be precise about why. I didn't publish because I thought the technique was harmless. I published because I thought someone else would publish something equivalent within 6 months anyway. I thought, if not me, then someone. If not now, then soon. I thought, the science is good. The science is correct. Someone should publish correct science. I still believe the science is correct. But 6 months is not nothing. 6 months is the difference between a system being deployed in October and being deployed in April. 6 months is the difference between a regulator having time to ask questions and a regulator being presented with a fait accompli. I gave away 6 months, maybe more. After I read the assessment in January, I stopped going to lab meetings. Not formally, I just stopped showing up. People asked if I was all right. I said yes. I said I was working on something. They assumed I meant a new paper. In the acknowledgement section of my March 2022 paper, I thanked 12 people, colleagues, collaborators, my advisor. One person I thanked sent me an email 3 months after publication, June 22, before the assessment, before I understood. The email was 2 sentences. Congratulations on the impact. I hope you're thinking carefully about what comes next. I read that email in June 2022 and thought he was talking about my next paper. I wrote back, "Thank you, I'm working on something new." I read that email again in January 2023, after the assessment, after the walk. He wasn't asking about my next paper. He was asking, are you watching what's being built with your technique? Are you paying attention to who's using it and how fast they're moving? The answer was no. I was working on something new. I sent him an email in February 2023. I said, I understand your question now. I'm sorry it took me this long. I'm trying to find the right way to answer it. He wrote back immediately. Take your time. The accounting is harder than the work. I printed that sentence. It's taped to the wall above my desk. The accounting is harder than the work. I published 9,400 words in March 2022. I've spent 2 years writing 847 words in response. The 847 words are harder. Not emotionally harder, technically harder. To write the paper, I had to understand gradient compression, run experiments, test the technique, verify results. To write the accounting, have to understand what I chose and why I chose it. I have to understand what not my job means when your job changes the world. When I submitted the paper, I thought, I'm a researcher, I publish research. What people do with research is not my responsibility. I thought, if I don't publish, someone else will. 6 months later, maybe, but someone. I believe that. I mostly still believe it. But I could have asked questions first. I could have asked, who will use this? What will they build? How fast will they move? I could have delayed publication. I could have shared the technique privately with safety researchers. I could have published with recommended deployment guidelines. I didn't do any of those things. Not because I thought they were unnecessary. Because I thought they were not my job. In June 2023, I was invited to give a keynote at a conference on efficient training techniques. They wanted me to talk about the paper. I said no. They asked why. I said I wasn't ready. They said, ready for what? I didn't have an answer. I have one now. There's a printout on my desk, the January 2023 Capability Assessment. I've read it many times, annotated it in pencil, notes in the margins, calculations, questions. Next to the 4 to 5 year estimate, I wrote one word. The word is good. I wrote good in this margin next to 4 to 5 years of previous development pace. Not good like I was pleased. Good like good, that's the number. Good, now I know. It took me 3 months to understand what that word meant. It meant I had been waiting for a number. I had been waiting for someone to quantify what I had done, not so I could feel guilty, so I could stop wondering. 4 to 5 years, good, now I know. I carry that printout with me every day in my bag, not as punishment, as record. The 847-word document has 11 words in the final section. Section 4, what I chose. I'm not going to tell you what those 11 words say, not because they're private, because I'm not certain they're correct yet. But I'll tell you what they're not about. They're not about guilt. They're not about responsibility in the way people usually mean that word. They're about choosing not to look. I could have looked. I could have spent a month, 2 months, 6 months asking, what happens if this works? I chose not to. Not because the questions didn't matter. Because I had already decided the answer to those questions wasn't my job. I think about the Tuesday morning often, January 17th, 2000, the laptop, the assessment, 4 to 5 years. I think about closing the laptop and going for the walk. I think about standing outside the bookstore, the illustration, the child and the robot, the warm colors. I think about the word I wrote in the margin. Good. Not good like pleased. Good like, now I have a number to carry. I open the document most mornings, 847 words, 11 words in the final section. I read the 11 words. I close the laptop. I will finish the accounting. I don't know when, but I know I wrote good in the margin, and I know what that word meant. It meant I'd been waiting for permission. Permission to stop wondering what I'd done. Permission to have a number. 4 to 5 years. Good. Now I know. I'll continue from where the script ends. The paper was published in May 2021, Computational Linguistics Quarterly, Volume 47, Issue 2, pages 203-229. Recursive semantic compression in large-scale language models, a framework for automated contextual prioritization. 27 pages, 14 figures, an appendix with implementation guidelines. The abstract ended with, these methods may enable significant advances in automated decision systems or requiring natural language interpretation at scale. May enable. May. 3 companies contacted me in the first week, one in California, one in Tel Aviv, one in Shenzhen. The California company wanted to discuss licensing. I said yes to a meeting. June 8th, 2021, video call, 4 people on their side. The technical lead was a woman named Priya, mid-20s. She'd read the paper twice. She asked good questions. Specific questions. The questions I should have asked myself. She said, Metin, the compression ratios you're achieving, if we applied this to eligibility screening, we could process applications at maybe 60 times current and speed. I said, yes, that's the point. She said, what's the error rate at that compression level? I told her, 0.3% on the test set. She wrote it down. Then she asked, what does 0.3% look like when you're processing 2 million applications a month? I remember my screen. I remember her face in the little rectangle, top row, second from left. I remember thinking, this is not a linguistics question. I said, that would be outside the scope of my research. She nodded. She said, of course. We signed the licensing agreement in August. I saw the job posting in November. Indeed.com. I wasn't looking for it. A colleague sent me the link. She thought I'd be interested. AI appeals specialist, healthcare eligibility determinations. Must have experience with automated decision review processes. It listed my framework by name. I clicked through to the company. Same company. California. They'd rebranded. Different name, same leadership team. Priya was head of engineering now. I opened my email. I found our correspondence June through August. I read it in order. Nowhere in any email does anyone say the word healthcare. Nowhere does anyone say insurance. Nowhere does anyone say eligibility in a way that made me ask, eligibility for what? I could have asked. December 21, an article in The Atlantic. When the algorithm says no, inside America's automated healthcare denials. 17 pages. My framework is mentioned on page 9. There's a woman. Photograph, Angela Reyes, 42, Phoenix, Arizona. The article describes her case. Stage 3 cancer, prior authorization for continued treatment, submitted December 1st, denied December 2nd. Automated review, processing time, 4 minutes. Denial reason, submitted documentation does not sufficiently demonstrate medical necessity per policy guidelines, section 4.72b. Her doctor resubmitted, twice, both denials, same processing time, same language, identical phrasing. She appealed to a human reviewer. 6 weeks later, the human reversed the decision. Immediately, the doctor's notes were clear, the medical necessity was obvious. The article quoted a data scientist, not from the company, someone independent. He said, "These systems are optimized for throughput and consistency. They're very good at finding patterns in language that correlate with approval or denial. They're not good at understanding what the language means." I read that sentence 11 times. I opened my paper, the original, A221. Page 17, section 4.3, trade-offs in semantic fidelity. I had written, while some semantic information is necessarily lost during compression, our experiments suggest that task-relevant meaning is preserved at acceptable thresholds for most applications. Acceptable thresholds. Most applications. I had not asked what application. I had not asked what threshold is acceptable when the task is deciding whether someone receives medical care. I had written a paper about making language processing faster, and someone used it to make denials faster. That's when I should have started looking. I didn't. I wrote a statement instead, February 2022, 400 words, on responsible implementation. I published it on my university webpage. I said researchers cannot control downstream applications. I said the framework itself is neutral. I said implementation decisions rest with institutions, policymakers, ethics boards. I said this is not my job. 18 people emailed me, colleagues, former students, 3 journalists. They said, "Thank you for speaking up." They said, "Important nuance." They said, "The technology isn't the problem." I felt better. That's the thing I need to say clearly. I felt better. I didn't look at healthcare news for a year. I didn't search for my framework's name. I didn't track implementations. I didn't reach out to Priya. I went back to my work, new projects, funding applications, graduate supervision. And then the Tuesday, January 17th, 2023. An email from someone I didn't know. Subject line, question about your 2021 CLQ paper. His name was Michael Torres. He was a graduate student, public health, Berkeley. He was writing a thesis about automated healthcare systems. He had found 16 insurance companies using my framework. 16 he could confirm. He suspected more. He had done something I hadn't done. He had calculated 0.3% error rate across 16 companies. Average processing volume 2.1 million claims per month per company. 33.6 million claims per month total. 0.3% of 33.6 million. 100,000. 100,000 errors per month. Not all errors are denials. Not all denials cause harm. Not all harm is Angela Reyes. Photograph on page 9, 42 years old, Phoenix, Arizona. But some are. His email was polite. He wanted to interview me for his thesis. He wanted to understand my intended use case. He wanted to know if I had thoughts on governance frameworks. He attached a spreadsheet. I opened it. 4 to 5 years. That's how long my framework had been in active deployment across healthcare systems before I looked at the numbers. 4 to 5 years of 100,000 errors per month. I wrote good in this margin because now I had something indefinite. Now I could stop carrying the feeling and carry a fact instead. Now I could start the accounting. I opened the document that night, 847 words. A statement on my 2021 paper and its implementation in healthcare systems. I have not published it. The 11 words in the final section are, I chose not to look because looking was not my job. That's what I keep reading. Every morning. Not because it's true. Because I need to remember I believed it was true. I need to remember that I built something powerful and I did not ask where the power would go. I published a framework for making language processing faster and cheaper, and I wrote may enable significant advances. And I collected the licensing fee, and I thanked Priya for the interesting questions, and I wrote outside the scope of my research. 100,000 errors per month for 4 to 5 years. Before I looked. This is the accurate thing I came to say. I will finish the accounting, but first I needed to say I wrote good in the margin. And for 6 months I have been trying to understand what kind of person writes that word at that moment. Now I know. Someone who was waiting to be told how much harm they'd done so they could stop wondering and start counting instead. Someone who needed permission. Permission to make it a number. 4 to 5 years. 100,000 errors per month. Good. Now I know. Now I can begin. Nigga.